Hello and welcome to episode 5 in the IdeaCast interview series. My guest in this episode is Nora Livingstone, CEO and co-founder of Animal Experience International. Nora's co-founder is Dr. Heather Reed, a wildlife veterinarian, and the two of them have created a wonderful example of the future of tourism, of ethical and compassionate tourism. And so we will be discussing AEI and its role in shaping the future of not only ethical and compassionate tourism, but sustainable tourism, and tourism that is based on what they call consent. And we will discuss consent-based tourism. AEI is also a B Corp company, and we will be discussing beneficial corporations. We will also be discussing how AEI pairs volunteers with partners around the world and places volunteers into environments where they may be of service, and in humility they only go there asking how they can be in service. It's a brilliant conversation. We also take time out to discuss cultural, racial, and gender equality and the ethics of compassion that surrounds that matter. And we will bring it back to the role that AEI plays in sharing experience and enriching the lives of the volunteers. So please join us for this beautiful and flowing conversation about Animal Experience International. Thank you and enjoy. And I have Nora Livingstone with me, and she is co-founder and CEO of Animal Experience International. And I am so grateful to have you on this interview, with me. And I'm looking forward to a really informative conversation. I don't know much about B Corps, and I did a little research on AEI, or Animal Experience International, which I will call AEI going forward. And so I'm here to learn, I'm here to understand, and I want to bring the viewers with us on that conversation of discovery and enlightenment as to what you all are doing. So could you give us a little provenance story, a little in the beginning on AEI and how things have progressed? I think it was 2012 is when you all started, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
It's now been almost 10 years of talking about AEI, and it's so incredible because when we started, it was this idea of, oh, we would like to do this, and we think this is a thing that we can do. And that evolved into us saying, oh, wow, this is what we do. So what we do is Animal Experience International, which we called specifically because we thought it would be really great for Google. If people are looking to do what we offer, that is exactly how they would talk about it, or they would ask Google. So we provide safe, ethical, and authentic volunteering with animals around the world. And so what it looks like is AEI is two of us. It's me and Dr. Heather Reed. And animal centers contact us first and say, we are looking for volunteers. We have a space for them. We have a model in which we won't let volunteers take professional roles. We do just want them to do, easy tasks, but important tasks. AEI does about 2 years of research to make sure that they are safe, they are ethical, they are in the community, and that they are authentically helping animals. And then we go and visit the placements, which is amazing. And then we come back and we tell would-be volunteers about it. And so people travel solo or with groups, depending on the way that they want to travel. And they go to all manner of animal centers. So we have domestic dog and cat spay-neuter programs. We have horse sanctuaries. We have wild horse, citizen and community science, wildlife rehabilitation and sanctuary, dolphin and shark conservation. So it's amazing because it's all kinds of different animals in all kinds of different places. and it's all community led. It's all in the context of where these animals are and how these animals need the help in that context. And it's just us like funneling volunteers. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to be an expert on animals. I don't have to be an expert on the specific country. I just get people to go and help animals, which is kind of a dream that I didn't realize I had.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's like, in reviewing your background and Dr. Reed's background, it was a beautiful combination. And so she was a wildlife veterinarian, right? If I read that right. And so you have a history or a background in sort of coordinating volunteers and getting things put together, which is a great practical skill to have for what you're doing or what you were getting started 9 years ago. So what a wonderful team that you brought together.
Yeah, and
To do the work.
she still is a practicing wildlife veterinarian,
Okay.
which is also, I think, amazing that she's able to do both. And she's a mother of 3 as well, which is also incredible. But I think it's amazing that she's still practicing because she's still doing this thing that she's passionate about and she loves. And it also means that as AEI evolves and progresses, and our ideas of tourism and business progress and become more ethical, also our ideas of animal welfare progress, and how animals are in enclosures, how we handle them, and things like that. So we have our fingers on multiple pulses, I guess, to make sure that as we know better, we do better, to quote Maya Angelou, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reading an article written by, I think it was in a 50 Plus magazine. So there was a woman 50 plus who was relaying an experience, and she had a portmanteau or a statement, a compound word in the beginning, voluntourism. And so in thinking about that, this is not restricted to academia or vets aspiring, sort of people in residency for veterinarian work. Somebody like, I'm super average guy, I could go and set myself up for an experience, and it's a volunteer experience, but it's a new sort of paradigm in tourism. Well, not a new paradigm, but it's to me a new paradigm in tourism, where you're doing 2 things. You're going and you're having a novel experience, you're going somewhere exotic, and then you're making a difference while you're there, which will imprint upon you multiple things. I was reading about people's experiences, and you, even in your website, you talk about how it's very life-changing for your persons that go out on these experiences.
Yeah. I always tell people, I love to tell people my background, because I didn't do a hard science. I never did a biology in university. I have no business doing animal stuff. So if I can do it, anyone can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important when we talk about we don't give away professional roles. There are people at these centers who have helped animals before we got there. They're helping animals right now, and they'll help animals when we leave.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about us from the global north being saviors, and it's not us going somewhere and saying, this is how you will help, or this is how we will help, and then leave.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the collaboration of the local community, saying this is what we want for our animals, our wildlife, and trees and ecosystems and things like that. And so it's better if people don't go with the idea that they're going to be professionals, they're going to take these leadership roles. And they're truly transferable skills. If you can cut up a mango, or if you are happy to learn how to cut up a mango, you can help a toucan that was stolen from the wild, was by an animal trafficker, was then confiscated from that animal trafficker and brought to a wildlife rehabilitation center so it can be released again. So you very much are helping that one individual toucan just by cutting up some mango for it. But then you're also telling a much greater story, because when you come back and you have a picture of you cutting up the mango to continue this analogy,
Yeah.
and the toucans that are in the enclosures ready to be released, people say, well, why were they there, and what is happening, and how did you get so close to this toucan? And you can talk about the wildlife trade and about poaching, and then you can also talk about the wildlife rehabilitation centers and the people, pardon me, the people all around the world who are helping these animals.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I think debunking the idea that help has to come from the global north,
Mm-hmm.
because I have had the privilege to be hosted all around the world, and in every country, every community that I'm in, I'm hosted by people that are already doing things with animals. And that gets to be everyone's story of, I got to help Mongolian scientists with horses. I got to help Thai veterinarians with elephants. Like, it gets to be this much bigger enlightenment for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that reminds me of something that was pretty impressive to me as far as a inspirational thinking. And it was the power of ask that you had brought up, and you mentioned that in your formative years, and you're coming up to be where you are now. So that ties in nicely. Where again, we're not the white savior. We're not coming down to show them how it's done and step aside. And the power of ask. You humbly arrive, and what can I do? And what a beautiful ethic to bring.
Yeah, and I think all of us have a story in our life that we're embarrassed about. And most of the time that's because we didn't ask how we could help someone, or what we could do, or how we could be of service. We just went into an interaction that we thought we knew what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And then someone said, you didn't, and you either hurt me, or you hurt someone else, or something happened. And it can be, and then you have to feel vulnerable, and then you have to feel embarrassed, and all these other things happen. When if you just go into the interaction with a little bit of vulnerability, saying, what can I do for you? Then it just opens up so much more, and that comfort and the trust is built on both sides. And it means that you can actually be valuable to the people and animals and everything around you. But it also means that the people that you're interacting with, that they trust you and you trust them. And there's no, I talk often about imposter syndrome and how I don't really have it at our centers, because I'm not going in saying, I know how to fix things. I'm going in saying, I have no idea.
Yeah.
How can I help you?
Yeah.
And so it makes it easy to sleep at night, because no one's going to find out who I am. They already know I'm someone that says, I don't know anything. Just put me to work.
Yeah, I've got these, and put them to use. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Years ago, I volunteered at an elephant center. It was a rehab center and a sort of a retirement home for elephants. And unfortunately, they were zoo kept, or they're mostly zoo kept. And I went in as somebody who had a little background in horticulture, and that was why they brought me on board, because I was able to assist in raising food for them. And but I learned so much more, and I went in with a little bit of that surety that I would be able to be of benefit to them, because I could keep a plant alive and make more plants out of those plants. But what I learned in the 3 years that I was there went way beyond that scope, and that bracketing of what I thought I could bring to the experience. And so that was enriching for me, and also humbling, because I learned a lot about zoology and zookeeping and animal medicine and things like large animal medicine.
Yeah.
You had mentioned in one of your interviews scooping elephant manure, and I brought to mind that when I worked at that center, I would come home I have a pickup truck, and I'd bring home a pickup truck load of elephant dung and use it as fertilizer in my yard. So every couple of weeks, my neighborhood smelled like the savannas of somewhere in Kenya or somewhere. I'm sure my neighbors, fortunately, one of my neighbors is a horticulturalist, so he gets it, but my neighborhood would get kind of ripe So anyway, getting back to the center, it's, and unfortunately it wasn't managed very well by the 501c. And so it dissolved, but with good learning experience. And it gave me a little taste of or it whetted my appetite for what you all do. And so going to be keeping your website on my my contacts list.
Wonderful.
Yeah, because when things open up again and we can start to travel, that's right up my alley. My last few trips to places weren't necessarily, they were for me more than for others, and so it'd be great to give back. And speaking of the world in 2021, and this is being recorded in late March, I know COVID has had an impact on just the flow of what you all do, but it certainly is something that can be brought back online once things open up again. So do you want to talk about that? And so, it'll be time sensitive, because hopefully by the end of this year, you guys will be flowing really well and getting back into it. But I think it's worth talking about for historical reference, if anything. People in 30 years will watch this video and say, "Oh my gosh, that COVID period."
Wow, did people really not travel for so long?
Yeah, it bred resiliency.
Yeah. Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So our last volunteer came back in February of 2020, and everyone came back safely, which was incredible and nice. It was a stressful kind of 2 weeks when Canada, Justin Trudeau went on record and told everyone to come home. Yeah. We don't know when you can. And then it was like a month later that the UK said, I think there might be a pandemic. And then it was a little bit while later that other countries said, maybe come home, I'm not sure. And so we would, in that couple weeks, in that month, we sent lots of messages to our volunteers saying, you get to choose what you're doing, but this is what we're hearing from my leader, from these leaders. This is what's going on. We don't want anyone stuck anywhere, and we don't want you to incur huge fines if those happen, or jacked up flight costs or things like that. So wonderfully, everyone heeded my warnings, and everyone got home safe.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's now been more than a year that we haven't had anyone traveling with us, which is it's good, because we're now in this, we know the right thing to do. And it's not like travel stopped for a couple months and then other travel happened and we're feeling some type of pressure. I feel very content in just waiting until we can have a full yes from the countries that host us, but also the small communities that host us. Most of our centers, if not all of our centers, are in rural areas. And so they're very COVID secure. But that also means they're COVID secure. They don't have a lot of visitors coming in there. So we think realistically what will happen is the centers will not much a vaccine, but will ask for a vaccine. So we'll be requiring it at that point, because it just makes sense. But the centers that we've been in contact with, all of our centers, but it does look like Costa Rica and Guatemala will be opening in the summer, and then there will be a slow waterfall of more volunteer or centers opening throughout the year. And then 2022, everything will be open. So we'll have all of our solo trips, but also have I'm going to be leading some group trips, because right now there is a lot of anxiety about travel, and I totally get it. And I don't want to handhold, but I want to have people's back and say, you can trust that we're safe, and you can trust so much because I'm going to be with you, and yelling at you to wash your hands and wearing masks and things like that.
Following the protocols. Absolutely. Absolutely. I it's encouraging to hear you say that. I'm not really burned out myself, because what I do for a living and my lifestyle prior to COVID kind of matches with where we are. I'm extroverted, but I'm also I'm happy to just sit and read a book, and I don't need to go out places. But anyway, it's good to hear that things are starting to move in that direction, and that I kind of set fall 21 as sort of a marker for when the first iteration of normalcy, new normalcy, will start to express itself. Yeah, sometime around the holidays, maybe that would be great, but with due caution. And so that's good that you all have a plan in place, and when groups go, that you guys can keep each other honest and keep a check on things like that.
Yeah, and I think like we've had to make the plans really well. We're really malleable, so the plans are ever changing right now, and it just goes like with what volunteers are comfortable with, and what the host communities are comfortable with, and what things look like. We realize that travel has changed a little bit, and I don't know if it's changed forever. But we've spent a year in isolation, and never before have the people really alive right now have spent that much time in isolation. So we are at a really great time to be really empathetic with animals that are in enclosures and animals that are being exploited in tourism. So we're able to, if not travel right now, really get more rational compassion and that kind of talk in just in the ether. And let's talk about how you didn't like to be in one room for a year. How do you think animals feel?
Exactly. Yeah, I follow some people on Twitter who are in the social sciences, cognosci and things like that, and they follow animal ethics and animal sentience. And so there's people out there working hard to establish that that it matters. It matters how we interact with those co-inhabitants of this planet. And
if we can grant individual personhood to rivers, which I think that we should, but if we can also grant individual personhood to corporations, why have we not given personhood and sentience, which we know animals are sentient? Why have we not done that for animals? We go from companies to rivers, and right in the middle, there's non-human animals, things that are just like us but are different, and we go, but you're different. Nah.
Yeah.
Fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. With the exception of New Zealand, I don't hear a lot of talk about addressing that. And it can be done in a way, there's different types of sovereignty. There's group sovereignty, personal sovereignty, and so forth. And so you can define an animal sovereignty if you can't wrap your head around the fact that they don't have enough cortical tissue to sort of be metacognitive or reflect, whatever your excuse is for not granting them their sentience. I could hear the scientists going back and forth, but grant them their basic sovereignty and their quasi personhood. And don't limit it to the mass of the animal. It's little tiny things living under leaves. They're part of that web, that part of that system, and it's actually to our advantage as the persons that we are to respect that, because the more we learn about food and sustainable agriculture and ethical agriculture, we learn about the web, and we learn about how everything is tied together. And that's probably the way forward in food production and food security and things like that. At least I'm predicting that. I follow that quite a bit with what people are doing in other countries. And so that web is very important. So that ties into that, I think, to the sovereignty. And you guys are definitely bringing that up, bringing that to giving that some presence, some salience, and that's to be commended for sure, because that's got to be the way forward. Because the exploitive, what we've done in the past just doesn't really. Like I said, the Elephant Center that I volunteered for was doing good things, but it was the legacy of the circus animals and the zoo kept animals, and that's a sort of a 19th century. Human, what do we call it? Anthropocentric view of things, like we're the dominators. And I want to also, speaking of commending you, the YouTube channel that you all have, if persons listening to this interview if we've whetted their appetite, I think, and I'm going to have the link in the description of this video, you guys do a beautiful job laying out tutorials, if you will, about the process and, what to do and what to pack and what about culture shock and things like that. And so I would encourage people who are, again, getting into what we're talking about to click that link and go to that. And one of the things that stood out to me amongst those was, again, culture shock. And you touched on that a little bit with people having a renewed perspective about isolation and confinement. And I'm kind of weird, so I would think that getting out of the house and doing something, I'd want to do something that sort of is counter to exactly what my deep domesticity that my hibernation in suburbia America land, and getting into something that's just so totally polar opposite of that. And so I don't know if I've ever experienced culture shock, but I think I would, short of having people, angry with me and not be, in other words, being in a place where we're not really welcome. I would love to have that challenge / opportunity to go somewhere where I'm not comfortable. I don't recognize anything, and I want to be there for a while, so that, like you said in that video, it sets in, and because that has to change your nature a little bit and your perspective on things. And it also opens up, and I'll shush in a second, it also opens up, I know, I can ramble, right? It opens up for me an argument. There's this sort of cultural relativism, moral relativism, and absolutism that the philosophers love to bang around. And in this instance, I side with a form of cultural relativism, that when you go to another person's country and environment and their village and their way of doing things, that you bring that with you, and you have that sense of, again, the power of ask and the humility of, hi, I'm here with no preloaded conceptions. I'm here with nothing other than my desire to help you. And so, again, I could get into a good debate with somebody who's all about this, we can't have cultural relativism, but I think for research purposes and purposes of the nature that you all provide in your service, in your company, that's important. So I will hush now and let you touch on it. But I just thought, of all the videos that you all had, that culture shock video really set off a light bulb in my head, that what a beautiful thing for us who live in suburbia, who live in America and North America, and need something a little different in our lives.
Yeah. Well, first I should say, I've said this before. I'm on record. My favorite form is long form. Like, I just love all the words and saying all the things to really accent a point, but then to really make it real. So never apologize for saying too much.
I just tend to blab, so
me too. This is
okay,
fine.
good. Yeah. Peas in a pod.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with culture shock, it's something that it goes from this is an adventure and this is a learning experience, to just being uncomfortable and just wanting to have a comfort from your default or from your norm. Mm-hmm. And I think culture shock can even happen at home. And when we talk about privilege, mm-hmm. and we talk about deconstructing or decolonizing privilege and things like that, that is the resistance a lot of people feel is culture shock. Mm-hmm. Our culture, me being a white woman, culture is default white in North America and default white supremacist. And mm-hmm. so in the Black Lives Matter movement and in Lane Back movement and Asian American and Pacific Islanders rights movement, that is being our norm, our default is being challenged. Mm-hmm. And so people can have people do have a bad reaction, but people can have a negative reaction because that is changing our culture, and it's good, and we need to change that culture. But I will understand, but I will not accept when people go, I don't like this, I don't want it to change. Mm-hmm. I can understand that people say, this feels different, this feels hard, I do not like it, I don't want to have to question everything I do. And I also say, okay, I hear that you don't want to be uncomfortable, but that doesn't matter anymore, because you now know that your comfort is because someone else is oppressed. And all of us are, Rachel Ricketts, who wrote a book that's called Do Better, she says we're all oppressed oppressors. All of us are in systems that oppress us, and we also oppress other people. And so culture shock is a lot more obvious when you take yourself out of your systems and get into different systems. People are different colors, they're different religions, they eat different things. And it can start as an adventure. Things are so different. This is so neat. This is great. But then that can sink into knowing how much you don't know can be uncomfortable. So there's only so many things that you even think to ask about. And this happens because we live in a default of ableism, white supremacy, fat phobia, things like that. And we have all this language that is here because we're comfortable. And we don't know because me being a white woman, I'll say, I don't know because I've had this privilege lifestyle. I don't know what is privilege. I don't know what needs to be decolonized. I don't know what I need to ask about. So we'll go into someone else's house and we'll think, oh, I should sit beside them. But in this culture, even in North America, everyone has different values on where how much space they want, especially in a time of COVID. There are people that will get more than less than 2 meters away from you, and you go, the culture has changed right now. We need to be further away, and you need to wear a mask. Now you have to have 2 masks on. We need to meet outside. And I think a lot of people, it's kind of anecdotal, I'll say some people are struggling in a time of COVID because the culture has changed so drastically. And they like their norm, and they like their comfort, and they like sitting in the default of things.
Right.
And it's been a year now of us having to actively think about a different way of living. And that's when culture shock starts to drag you down. When you can't be comfortable because you're always thinking about how things have changed. And that's the sort of sine wave of culture shock. It's an adventure. This is amazing. I'm doing well. And then you go down in a trough and you go, oh my gosh, this takes so much to learn. And I made a mistake again, and I offended people, and I hurt myself. And then you start to learn again, and you get on the top and you're like, I'm rocking it. I'm so good at this. I'm understanding. I'm interested. And then you go down the trough again. And it is just life, but we put this lens of culture on it.
Well said. Well said. Heather McGee just put out a new book called The Sum of Us, and it's taking on the zero-sum theory, which is a fallacy. It's a zero-sum theory fallacy, and she basically lays out. You brought up white supremacy, and lays out a case that it affects us all. So the mythology of the white European dominator narrative. First of all, was perpetuated by sort of the ruling class, the aristocracy, to help keep, there's another book called White Trash. It's a really good book that lays out the argument for how racism was cultivated in this country, and the myth of white supremacy, because it was a way to manage both blacks and whites and in their poverty, and to keep them fighting with each other so we don't notice what the rest of them are up to. And 2 good books that I would recommend for what you just suggested, because if you want to push back on things like Black Lives Matter or disadvantaged people, again, what we're talking about, go into culture shock, go somewhere, go to Africa, and be out of your element. When I was a kid, my parents got divorced, and my dad moved into a neighborhood, and there weren't any white people there. And so I had these beautiful experiences there. And sometimes they were challenging because the kids were like, who are you and what are you doing here? So we had to sort things out, and it never got too violent, but it was a learning experience. And I even remember one of my friends, we were playing, and he wanted to go back to his house, and he said, you're gonna have to sit on the porch. My dad doesn't like white people. And I was like, okay, no problem. Yep. And that was just a tiny little taste that helped. It blossomed inside of me. And I said, let me be a little more tempered in my thinking about, these kind of issues about who I am, and even though it's essentially a construct, it's still a very deep and deep-rooted construct of our culture. And so anyway, but yeah, the added benefit of what you all provide is to perhaps build a little more of a dynamic perspective on the part of, again, people like you and myself, who live in these environments and enjoy the privilege of not only our skin color, but just of being middle class, of being educated, of being able to go get food whenever we want, or live in a house that's and not being chased around by the latest flavor of political upheaval that's going on in a particular region. So there's so many layers of privilege that you can come back home and be affected in the sense that you may want to make some changes and you may want to appreciate things a little bit more.
Yeah, like our privileges are blind to us, and that's how the systems operate. So if someone says your life has been easier because of a privilege, you say, what privilege? I have struggled in some ways, and because the systems exist to help you without showing they're helping you, if you don't want to hear it, if you want to put blinders on, then yeah, you can think that there isn't any privilege, and you can think that you're not oppressed. And looking at white supremacy, looking at the patriarchy in the same way, like toxic masculinity and the patriarchy does no favors to men who want to experience a full range of emotions, and it does no favors, obviously, to women. And non-binary and everyone in between. And I think that is, a real thing to also talk about, that we all are oppressed and we all fail under these systems. So there is no reason to continue these systems.
Yeah.
We're not better because our boots are on the necks of someone else. We just got there because our boots are there. And that's unacceptable. And we know this. So why not move forward better?
And the one thing that's ironic is that, and again, people can push back, if we give up that quote, if we, as you say, deconstruct or decolonize that privilege, we don't lose anything. All we do is gain. And that's what Heather McGhee is pointing out in that book. We have a lot to lose right now. And she was citing instances during desegregation where people would rather shut down a city park than have Black people in it, or shut down the community pool. And they did. They cemented it over rather than integrate. And so it's these kind of bite your nose to spite your face things that have to be examined, because, and I'm sort of an egalitarian person. I'm all for it. Let's go, because I know I have nothing to lose. I'm not going to be castrated or neutered, or I'm not going to be, none of these terrible things are going to happen. And one thing that always sits with me is there was an interview I read a few years ago with Chris Rock, and the interviewer had brought up civil rights or something like that. And Chris Rock says, and this just has such salience for me, he says, it's not Black people that are making progress in civil rights. He goes, it's white people that are making progress in civil rights. And when you really think about that, it's true, because Black people shouldn't have to seek equality or seek advancement to have basic dignities, basic privileges, these kind of things. And so and I bring that in. I would also apply that to women's rights and feminism and the women's movement, that women shouldn't have to struggle to be equal. They shouldn't have to struggle for normalcy. And so it is, again, I think the onus is on people who are, for essentially fear-based reasons, unwilling to examine. It's not even giving anything up. It's just examining the narrative. And then again, your power of ask would be the next precedent, the next thing to initiate. And so if we can get some people into that mode. And another thing I'll add to that is that when we look at the folks who are the most resistant, and they're the ones, with the, whatever they're called, big boys or proud boys or whatever they are now, I look at them with compassion, because I know that they're suffering. And one thing I always, when my wife and I are talking, I'm always being pedantic, and I'm saying, don't look at the symptom, look at the cause. So the symptom are these jerks that are running around, doing all this stuff, and this pseudo masculinity, this pseudo machismo. It's not even real because what I would define as a real man is somebody who has the ability to go and see 2 points, and to see and to understand at least the other narrative. So when you're engaging with an interlocutor, or you're engaging with people that we would otherwise dismiss, that you understand that there is that need for compassionate inquiry, skepticism, which is inquiry, and to say, why are these people suffering? So when I look at, again, that woman that God help me, I can't remember the name of the woman that wrote the book, White Trash. She's not trashing white trash. She's basically saying that the lower classes of white folk for the last 300 years have been on a parallel course with, and not to the degree, but a parallel course with the African Americans and Black people in America. But they were, again, imprinted and conditioned to be divisive, so that there was never this sort of conciliation or reconciliation to be united, in the sense that they're just being exploited and manipulated. And so, when I look at 2021 and I see in the United States a lot of the cultural upheaval that's going on, and things that Trumpism brought along, I look at what brought that on. And so you look at people who over the last 41 years, since Reagan brought neoliberalism into the American politic, that job security, job benefits, pay, all these things, unions, they were destroyed. The working class, barely educated American, and I'm barely educated myself, but I have a high school degree and that's it, have been on one hand indoctrinated to be distracted by cultural issues, but on the other hand have basically had everything stripped out from under them. And so when you have these two conflicting things, that's where I see these crazy white supremacist types, the really angry ones, because the people and this is pushing things a little bit, but Malcolm X had an excellent speech about field Negroes and house Negroes. I don't know if you ever heard that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that house slave mentality it has some parallel to what has happened to the working class in this country, in that they want to make sure that master's taken care of, and that master's provided for, and that nothing shakes up the system, because they're in the house. Mm-hmm. And they have that tiny token privilege. And so again, the working class whites in this country are being told that their religious freedoms will be preserved, their gun rights will be preserved, that homophobia will continue to flourish, and that we're looking out for you, and it's because of America, because of liberty, because of all these things. But meanwhile, they've had everything ripped out from underneath them. They have no sovereignty, no dignity, and no 50 years ago, they had a good paying job. They had union benefits and things like that. And just a lot of that's been taken away. And so anyway, I'm rambling and I'm off on a tangent, but I think when I look at the greatest resistance to what you were addressing, I look at it through the lens of compassion, to say that this has to be confronted, but it also has to be, to kind of sound cheesy, it's like a heart-based approach that also has to be coupled with, an activist approach to sort of resist, because it's in our legislative body. There are people in there saying stupid things in Congress right now, and yep. And fortunately they're clowns, and they are, and it's all very self-destructive. But we don't want that to become a norm. We don't want that to be normalized. And so anyway.
Yeah. No, I think there are a lot of people who feel like they have been left behind, mm-hmm. and the idea of resource scarcity, mm-hmm. is something that runs deep in America and in Canada, of the idea it's a pie, and if mm-hmm. we give someone else a little bit more, it means we have less.
Yeah.
And with rights, with healthcare, with anything else, if we as a society say that there's more than two genders and it's not just a gender binary, somehow that takes away from me. Mm-hmm. And I can understand how it can be scary, and I can understand in a world of capitalism and in a world that you are told you have the ability to get anything you want if you just work hard enough, and that fallacy if you hear other people are being treated better just because human rights, I can understand how you'd be angry about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's having to like unpack that fallacy because of privilege,
Yeah.
because of everything that we don't see around us. And so when people like the Proud Boys have these ridiculous notions that they are superior, that is just them rattling at their cage saying, don't leave me behind, don't take the power away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And the power that you have, you didn't earn, and you didn't get here because you're better. Just the system made you think you were, and now you're scared because people are saying that they see the system,
Mm-hmm.
and they see that it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand your compassion, and on a macro level, yes. And then when I get an individual, maybe opposite, like an individual level, I'm like, yes, I can understand your heart and I see where you're going. But then on a macro level, I'm like, Proud Boys, get out of here, don't care.
Well, it has to be woven into the fabric, that compassion. So in other words, don't become them, because again, we tend to become what we hate when we hate too much. And so that's all. But it's not that you go up and you hug them and you say, I understand, and let's have bull crap. That's not going to work. But when you are in your activist mode and carry that with you to say, I can make decisions about how I address this and confront this, and I do need to be strong and I do need to stand my ground, but at the same time I need to know my enemy and my interlocutor, my opposite number, and I don't even like the term enemy because it shouldn't be, but it's your counterpart, that you're engaging with in what is essentially a cultural clash or war or whatever you want to call. Again, strong words, but and you hit the nail on the head when I was brought up the zero-sum fallacy with the pie chart. That's all it is. It's the sort of again, fallacious perception that if you give something up, you're giving something up, and you're not even giving something up. You're just opening up, and you are understanding that. And again, I'm cynical. I will say, Mr. Proud Boy, sir, it's not the Mexican that has threatened you. It is the guy that's worth $400 million that sits, at a computer, and he leverages capital all day long, and he needs to control a narrative that keeps you complacent and keeps you voting for a certain party, a certain a senator or whatever, that is also a benefactor of my funds that I distribute to keep the narrative. Again, it's all narrative warfare. It's all information control and so forth. So again, that's why I bring up the compassion component. It's like, yeah, you have to fight the fight. But like I said, the more armed you are with a dynamic that can eventually prevail, it will prevail. Because I think sometimes activism, and now I'm in my early 50s, and I'm a jaded old guy that's been an activist. I was going to protest when I was a kid. We would go down because I lived in DC, so there's always something to get upset about and go to a rally. But it's just tempering it a little bit and using caution when entering into an engagement. So that when I say the heart and all that kind of stuff, it's more that it's just sort of tempering enough that you're going to be able to outmaneuver and you're going to be able to outwit and out argue, but it's not it's solution oriented dialectic. It's solution oriented confrontation, if you will. That your aim is a solution, and the guy that's already put on all this the clown suit and all that kind of stuff, it's probably too late. But again, people who can be reached and communicated to, that again is where I'm heading, is to that sort of just know who you're dealing with and what their story is.
And I think it's important to have everything challenged. Like online, if I see someone that has written an anti-trans statement, I always challenge it, because I'm probably not going to change their mind, but there's someone else who is going to see that this comment either went unchallenged or there are, allies out there. And I think like this is where these discussions go. maybe this person is too far gone. Maybe this person isn't, but it's not for me to argue with them. But for the people that are listening, for the people that hear, they need to know there is a counter to this hate. And it's not hate on hate. It's, you know, like white supremacy is for no one. Feminism is for everyone. And it's bringing everyone in. It's not saying I hate men. It's saying we are all equal in the binary, but also in gender nonconformism. All of us are here, and we want all to be equal and equitable and things like that. And so it's having that counter, and it's saying, no, not even for you. I don't even care if you agree with me. Just no.
Yeah. And if you can do it again, in a sense that's going to, again, put up a blow for blow engagement, but nonetheless, if your wording is such that it may seep through, because, and I guess I could cite a point, is like, I've seen people go after people who make stupid comments, hateful comments, and those comments that are countering that hateful are so charged and so, they're either passive aggressive, they're vitriol, or they're outright aggressive. And my concern about that is that might push that other hateful person over the edge, and they'll take a baseball bat and they'll go pummel a trans person to death or a gay man to death. And so that's why, again, I say insert the charge. And I'm not talking hippy dippy love and peace and all that. It's more the sensible warrior that you know why your interlocutor is hurting so much, why your interlocutor is so hateful, because hate is fear, and fear is an absence of reason. It's not an absence of love, it's just an absence of reason, and reason can help de-escalate that level of fear. But again, some people are just hardwired that way, or they're traumatized and they haven't resolved it. So we could spend hours trying to figure out why they hate. But like I said, when I see exchanges like that, sometimes I see people who are almost being counterproductive in their retort or their reply, and that they go for the shame tactic. And shaming has an effect, and shaming will maybe break somebody out of their, like Caesar Milan with his dog, break you out of your little stupid narrative that you're involved in. But sometimes it could also push somebody in a direction where they're like, that's it, that's the final straw. I'm gonna, I'm getting my whatever, and I'm gonna go hurt. I know where there's one of those people, and so that's why I say just, temper it just a little bit, but don't give up the fight, go do what you're going to do, because again, it for the people who have gone too far off the radar, it's more a matter of just shielding those who need to be shielded and protected from that.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think like when you counter an argument, it doesn't have to be a counter of an argument. You have to understand who your message is for and the context of it. So for the example of an anti-trans comment, I could say all kinds of wild, mean things to the person who hates other people, but I am here to counter, to let people who are reading it, maybe a baby trans, maybe someone who is just understanding a little bit more of their gender nonconformism, maybe just someone else who thinks that they're an ally, and what does that look like? I'm talking to them. So so online, the comment that I would write wouldn't be like, you're a dummy and you don't know what you're talking about. It's, hey, here's some science, and this is why trans people are okay with me, and like not even okay, are loved by me. And so that is signaling just, the other person may not like it. Doesn't matter. It's not for them. Yeah. It's for the other people to look at it and go, okay, there is a counter, and that counter is love and acceptance and allyship and acknowledgement that they are real people, and it's, they should be seen as real people. That's the importance for me.
Yeah. Amen. No, that's beautiful. And that's in line with what I'm, again, I've been sort of droning on about, is just choose how you engage. This is almost like the art of war. It's like there's books that were written in Japan, 500 years ago about how to really be with your wits about you, and with your I follow one Cog Saga, is your salience landscape, your perspectival awareness landscape and know what's going on. Think 3 steps out and think how the counter reaction to your move, just so that's all. And again, I support anybody's struggle or efforts to balance and normalize our cultural expression. Because it's necessary. Because again, as Heather McGee pointed out, it affects all of us. And so, we all have to kind of just figure out how the game's going to get played going forward. And it will. I have faith. You guys, you're younger than me, and I have faith in your generation and in younger ones coming up that I think there's I'll say this as an older guy who's cynical, but with a little tempering of how it's done. In other words, like a form of wisdom in how it's done. That enormous energy and spirit that's being delivered. That my generation, we played around with it. The boomers did it with the civil rights in the 60s and the sexual gender equality movement in the 70s, the ERA and things like that. It's been done, but there seems to be a lot more in the we'll go back to pie charts of the population of people under 40 that are willing to step up, willing to have the courage, willing to say what needs to be said, willing to do what needs to be done to move beyond this and get into some of where we can start saying post this and post that with sound, authentic grounding to it. Wouldn't it be great to be in a post-race world? I like post-racial, post-racial superior world, not just post-race, because that'll take several iterations of progress to gel.
And I think race is important. Like, we look different, and that's it will always be important to show off the diversity of who we are and our ancestors and their struggles and trauma, and also their celebrations. Sonia Renee Taylor, who wrote The Body is Not an Apology, she identifies as she, her, and we. And she says we because she is her ancestors, if they are blood ancestors or, thought leaders that create her. And I think that is so powerful and so beautiful, because like one day I will be someone's ancestor and they will say I'm wise. But we're not working towards a society that everyone is beige and no one sees color. We're working towards a society that everyone is celebrated in, when we give up fat phobia and we give up racial superiority and we give up ableism. It's not that we're taking away people's different abilities. It's that these are how people are identifying, and everyone is celebrated in those differences in their identities.
Yeah, we can be comfortable in our own skin, whatever that happens to be, shade or anything. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nora, we took on the world and we addressed some issues. We're gonna win. Yeah. I think civility, reason, and tolerance and all those beautiful terms. I think we're moving in that direction. I really do. Again, I think the baton's is being in the process of being handed off. Again, I draw the line at around 40. So,
oh dear.
People under 40. Well, yeah, there's gray area, and I'm not into generationalism either. To me, it's like astrology. It's like, oh, tell me when you were born and I'll know everything about you, So I'm generalizing when I say 40 is the demarcation, but I'd say that also as a sort of a reverent gesture to, people coming up, people ascending, both in age and wisdom, that the heart that's there and the drive that's there is more palpable and more felt, in the sense that, and I think part of it ties in with the advent of social media and the immediacy of exchange and the proliferation of the ability of exchange with numerous, when I was coming up, we had telephones, books, that was it, we didn't have any of this stuff. So it was a different dynamic. So that has its shadow side, but I think it really also has the ability to speed things up and add some there's no such word as rapidity, but I love that word anyway. It's like
Yeah.
brings a rapidity to it. You know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I don't think you have to look very far to see that. Like, look at look at TikTok and the creators in indigenous TikTok, or fat activism TikTok, feminism. Like, there's suddenly a way for all of us, all intersections, to rapidly have these really beautiful ideas and talk about resiliency and talk about how you're feeling and how someone else is, and to be able to inspire really quickly. Like, these some of these TikToks are not quick to make, but because they're so quick to consume, you suddenly are quickly inspired, and you quickly know that you're not alone, and you know that there are other people out there. And I bring up indigenous TikTok a lot because in Canada, the last residential school closed in 1996. So in my lifetime, we still had residential schools, and we, as the Canadian government and the Canadian population, and didn't let Indigenous people sing or dance. It was not allowed, and was often beaten out of the children of these residential schools. But now Indigenous TikTok is resilient and joyful and amazing, and they talk about this racialized trauma that their grandparents and their parents and even them went through. And then they wear the regalia and they dance and they sing and they have this art, and it is amazing to see. And it really does show you that, like, yeah, the younger generations are not broken. The younger generations see us as their ancestors and are building on all these foundations that were here before. So it is so important to have foundations of love, and not just tolerance, but also celebration and acceptance. So it's not so hard for the other generations to add on to that.
Absolutely. You bring that up, and it reminded me of something I saw last year in Australia. They're teaching the Aboriginal language in public school, and so Hollies like us are learning it, and we're preserving that language to keep that culture alive and not have that culture just completely assimilated into European or colonial culture, which I thought was really neat. So there's just multifaceted progress. And what was I going to say? There was something that popped in when you were. It'll come back. But well, I do want to progress through a couple more questions. We'll circle into. I'm gonna have to use my cheat sheet here. What do I want to talk about? Oh, let's talk about B Corps and open that up. So that's beneficial corporations, right? Is that what the B Corp stands for? How about you enlighten me about B Corps? I did a tiny little bit of research on it beforehand, but you and your see, I almost did that. Yeah, I called it. You and your company were 5 years running in the top 10 percentile for B Corps, and so talk to me about B Corps.
Yeah. The only reason that we didn't get the Best of the World designation in 2020 is they didn't actually run it. Yeah. So
that's understandable.
So I think that we're still in it. I hope we are. So a B Corp is a certification that you pay into to be audited at the start and then every 3 years. And it's a legal requirement once you are part of it. It's not just a pay-to-play certification. You're legally required to go through the audit, and the audit has to show a quantifiable benefit to the community that you're operating in, the environment. You have to be transparent. You have to have good governance. So it's not just so one of the reasons when I corrected you and I said we're not an organization, we are a corporation, right, it's because when I was in school, I did think that they were totally different things. I thought that organizations change the world, they're amazing, they're the ones that save trees, and corporations, I mean, like, I went to university when the documentary The Corporation came out. So it's like, the corporation is terrible, cuts down the trees, puts their boots in the necks of people, and only does bad things. So now that I live in less of a binary, I know that there is a spectrum of both,
Right.
and there's a way to benefit the world in both ways. People in a capitalist society that we live in, that it's hard to disengage when you're in North America, to completely disengage from capitalism. When you buy coffee or solar panels or shoes or honey or oat milk, is trying to think of all the things that like I have bought, chapstick. Yeah. All of those things, every time you buy something, you are voting for it. And so we see this with fair trade coffee. You know, we'll say 20 years ago, if you said fair trade coffee, people would be like, what do you mean fair? Do you mean free trade? Do you mean NAFTA?
Right.
And then, you know, through lots of time, and I'll say like 10 years, people knew what fair trade coffee was, but like, how do you get it? And isn't it super expensive? But now getting fair trade coffee, it's either the same price or it's, you know, it's hard to, where I get coffee from, it's hard to find not fair trade coffee. And there's just been so many people that have been investing, and not investing in an angel investor way, investing by buying a cup of coffee that is that one cup of coffee every time you buy it, if it's fair trade, you are signaling to the roasters and the cafe workers and the corporations that you want fair trade things. And so whatever the motivations are behind the company that owns this coffee, they're saying we will sell more we'll sell more coffee and make more money if it's fair trade. So in that idea, in that very like corporate underbelly way, that's what B Corps are. But it's not just fair trade, it's all these other things. And so a quantifiable benefit for AEI, as examples, we can't just say we help horses in Mongolia. In the audit, they say how many horses and how do you help them? How many hectares of land are directly protected because you have invested volunteers at this national park? Looking at, there's education that we do with the humane treatment of dogs in Mexico. And they say, okay, but who was educated? Did you write one pamphlet and then it's sitting on a hard drive somewhere? Or did it get out to school children? How many got out there? And like, did you write a blog post that was about, you know, asking a group that you want to be there? Or are you actually investing in single mothers that are having homestay volunteers there? So it's an eternal process. It takes a really long time, and I think that it should, because we're looking at every single intersection that we're in the community, that we're working our governance as well, and we're working with the environment. So, you know, in B Corps, there's I think like 3,800 at this point.
Wow.
Which is incredible. When we became a B Corp, I think there were like 200 or something. It was like kind of this cool thing.
Nice.
And now it is, I'm constantly surprised. I buy my oat milk and I just buy it because it's the only oat milk that exists where I live. And I just saw a bee on it and I was like, amazing, B Corp.
Very cool. So people can look for that both online and intangible, hands-on. That's cool.
Yeah. So you can go on so B Labs is a certification organization that does it, the charity, that does all the audits and all the everything. And you can go on there and you can look specifically for, I'm looking for shoes. And Allbirds just became a B Corp. So you can look at that and you can say, oh, amazing. Like this company that I already really like, I already know their shoes, but then you can go down the list and see like even more. And then you can look at the score that the B Corp has gotten. So there's some B Corps like us that have a very high score in environmental and social responsibility and benefit. And there's others that are co-ops that have a lot of people under them, that have a lot of employees, and they score really high in governance and in employee welfare. Since AEI is only 2, it's hard for us to score high on that.
So as somebody who has claimed to have to work 18-hour days, did you kind of like fudge that a little bit and be like, oh, Nora gets treated wonderfully, you know?
I get treated
I buy her
well.
oat milk all the time.
Yeah.
No, just
very
kidding.
easy being a vegan.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that was one of the things when we went through our audit the very first time. We looked at it as a way to pat ourselves on the back and say, what are we doing well that we stumbled into? But also, what can we do better? And how can we make AEI better when we do hire people? And how can we make AEI better for us? Because we can, in this society, it is very easy to think the hustle is really important. And it's really easy to kneel at the idol of productivity. And if we are going to have a B Corp and say how important it is to care for the world and care for animals and care for the community, how dare we not care for ourselves? That's completely, you know, divorced of like what we're doing.
Yeah.
We can only help if we aren't feeling resentful about helping.
Yeah.
And so it means that it takes a little bit longer for AEI to grow, and it takes a little bit longer for for us to grow, but it means it is sustainable, and it means that it's okay because we are also benefiting. We aren't like we aren't getting blood from a stone and saying, you know, we believe in this so much. We believe in this so much, but I also believe in myself a lot.
Right.
And you know, it's important to have you know, a holistic view of how we're operating. And so, and then it's also like, it's an amazing community. We're doing a giveaway coming up because it's March, and March is actually B Corp Awareness Month. But the giveaway kind of just started because I sent some messages to some B Corps that I thought were kind of cool, and was like, hey, if I just like shout you out on Instagram, doesn't even have to be like a big thing. Do you just want to like give me something small, like a pen or a bag or a tote bag or something like that?
Right.
And it's really interesting because the groups that wrote back, like there's a solar panel company, like you can get energy from a company who obviously cares about the environment, the solar panels, but they care about the community, and they care about education, they care about their workers. No longer do we have to grit our teeth being consumers and going like, oh, I need to buy this and I don't feel good about it. Right. You can feel good about these things because the money that you're putting into these companies is, you know, they're good companies, quantifiably, not just like, oh, I feel good. Like you can see their score and go, oh wow, they do a lot for the environment.
Yeah, for sure. No, I see this again. I think I touched on it earlier. Is we're looking forward into this century as far as how commerce and enterprise move into hopefully a more ethical and sustainable mode. That B Corp really hopefully will be part of that spearhead. And I know I have a woman, Benita Matufsko, who's hopefully going to come on and do an interview with me. I'm doing a pre-interview meetup with her in about a week, and she's part of that sharing economy. So she wrote a book called Generation Share. And I'm curious because I'm ignorant. I want to know how sharing can be scaled up, but I see it at a one particular, not quite micro, but a meso layer of how we do things, that sharing has a lot of viability to it as well. The other thing that I like that I'm seeing that's been around for a long time is the worker co-ops and employee-owned businesses. Richard Wolff's a huge proponent of that. I've watched some of his debates and interviews with that, and you know, I think if you combine a number of these different new platforms, these new ethical approaches to how we manage, you know, market and enterprise, The dinosaur, the relic of this sort of corporatocracy that's taken hold. And also, I think even in corporate America, especially in some elements of tech that you're seeing, again, not to be generational, but younger folks, younger people who are coming into positions of power have a different approach, and they understand that their employees need to be treated like human beings, and they need to be paid and living decent wages, and just the more you invest in a person, the more they're going to be productive for you, rather than say, here's $9 an hour, and if you don't like it, move to wherever and deal with it. So I think the horizon is pretty bright, and of course, that was one of the big things when you agreed to do an interview with me, is that you're informing me about B Corps, and those who are watching and enjoying this interview. It's a way forward, and just to give some relevance to B Corps for people who can certainly go Google it and find. I know Patagonia was one of their bigger ones, and I think Ben & Jerry's had been there. Now, they were sold to a company or a larger corporation. Did they still retain their? Do you know offhand if they may have retained that B Corp status?
Yeah, so that's one of the things. When you become a B Corp, it goes into your articles of incorporation. Okay. So you're always a B Corp.
So it transfers.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, which is something that's also really important. Like, it's these brands, these companies are built on these ideas of equity and fairness and justice, and people continue to invest by buying these things. Mm-hmm. And once, and if they are sold, then people go, well, what do I buy now? Well, if it's a B Corp, it's always a B Corp. So you can buy that. Or, if you want to divest into something smaller and build something else up, you can do that as well. And I think that's so interesting. And you can also, everything is transparent and on the public record. And so if you want to look at Ben & Jerry's score, when they were independent, and then how the score changed when they were bought, not bought out, that's not right. When things were transferred, merged
maybe.
then you can see that, and you can see if it fell, if it grew, where it fell and where it grew. And so, like, there are some people that will do that deep dive, and that's great. And there's other people that will say, as long as you still are a B Corp, you're still doing more than other companies. Yeah. So I'm still going to invest in that. And I think that's pretty cool. And knowing that there are, a diverse group of B Corps now, there's everything under the sun, and in many different countries as well. It's not just in North America and Europe. It's all over the world. It makes it it makes it just really interesting, because there is this hunger for a different type of capitalism. Yeah. This is how things have worked. We don't like the status quo. And is being a B Corp for everyone? No, like, certainly not.
Right.
But as we know that B Corps can exist, we can be in a world that different types of companies can exist, and there can be a sharing economy, and there can be tech companies that pay people a living wage. Amazing.
Yeah.
This will change the world.
Right. Or giant online retailers. Hint.
Right. Like, we're kind of understanding that the world doesn't need billionaires, whoever they could be.
Yeah.
What the world needs is us looking empathetically and with rational compassion among everyone and saying, do I need something delivered to me within an hour of me ordering it?
Right.
Do I need to be so cheap? Like, do I need that?
Yeah.
Or would I like something to come in the next week that everyone was paid a living wage, everyone has health care, and a bunch of trees weren't cut down to make this item?
Right.
Like, the want versus need, I think, is something that's going to really change capitalism.
Oh, absolutely. And if you break it down and you divide the cost up per packet, per item, per piece, whatever, per exchange, again, to scale things up, to be able to pay somebody a living wage, or offer something to the employee, I don't think you're looking at a huge increase. Also, if you get out of the stock market and you don't have to be beholden to shareholders, and you don't have to be beholden to a bloated corporate structure, all the blank, CFO, COO, all these, that's necessary. You need to pay talent money to run the corporation well, and that needs to be acknowledged. But I think, again, the corporate structure is not up, it's inverted in a sense, and even Noam Chomsky talks about it. He calls it inverted Marxism. And so I'm straying a little bit, and I'm borrowing a little too much from that, but it points out the sense that like you just said, we don't need billionaires, that the result of success should be equitably transferred or distributed into that organization itself. And so you don't end up with the one guy. And fortunately, a couple of them have the sense of noblesse oblige, and they have a conscience. And so, and I can name names, but people are opening up, and they did that back in the 19th century. The people that the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and all these guys, I don't know if they felt guilty or what, but they did turn around at the end of their lives after they'd already, done the terrible things to the workers that they did. And they did try to have some philanthropy and altruism and things like that. But again, we don't need that. We need some real-time dispersal of that revenue generated within a company, and it can be appropriate. It can be, there's a tier of people who have masters or PhDs and things. They earned it. They should be compensated accordingly. So in other words, you can restructure a corporate structure so that you don't have a guy making by way of shareholder funds and so forth, $50 million a year. That's a little, and it, that's arbitrary. I mean, I shouldn't say that we should determine who earns what, but let that be determined by each man gets a vote, or each person gets a vote in the corporation.
Yeah, and like with a triple bottom line model, it's like people, planet, and profits.
Yeah.
You are, it's a business, and you're building a business, but you're not building a business only to make money.
Yeah.
You have a purpose behind it, and that purpose sometimes is in the service or the product that you're selling, but sometimes it is just, I have this platform that's a business, I can be better. Yeah. And I don't have to engage in, like, calling it what it is, like modern day slavery. That is something that we don't have to be part of, so I can make a bunch of money. I feel like I'm a good enough business person that I can make a bunch of money by not doing that, by not cutting down all these trees and having terrible workers' rights, or not having workers' rights at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of cutting down trees, I'm going to change directions a little bit and go on a tangent. When I was thinking about your company this weekend, I thought, and I'm a plant guy, I was saying that earlier with the elephants, and I love horticulture and botany. I have another YouTube channel with about 1,000 uploads on it, and it's all about like Florida botany and plants and so forth. And so thinking about what you and Dr. Reed are doing, I thought, there could be this is a great model for doing that with horticulture, and not necessarily with botany, but maybe in the academic sense. But a lot of what I've been researching lately related to that topic of horticulture is what's going on in sustainable agriculture, what's going on in permaculture, what's going on in regenerative and reforestation techniques, reversing desertification, carbon capture, all these really exciting things that are manifesting in multiple different ways. And even some of the waste to energy programs where plant waste is converted. We had a place here in my community that was an alcohol plant. It never scaled up effectively, and so they had to shut it down. But they were going to turn yard waste into alcohol that would turn into electricity. And so, just these novel concepts working with plants. I thought, what a wonderful mirror to what you all do is to just organize these voluntourisms for these projects. So in North Africa, they're learning to, again, learn sustainable agriculture, reverse desertification, learning techniques of permaculture sustainability. Australia is doing, it's all over the world. I mean, it's unending. Saudi Arabia, at least on the west coast of Saudi Arabia, they're turning their wadis back into habitable terrain for plants and animals, because in the 50s, it was better living through, cut everything down and just spray things and, that kind of mentality. So I'm on a long tangent here. I just thought, what a wonderful amendment, not necessarily that you all have to take on, but just if somebody wants to do something in a similar vein, that can apply to plants as well, and to horticulture and botany, in the sense that whether they're in academia or they are, beyond academia, and they just want to, they have a degree in horticulture and they want to go out, or guys like me that are just geeks with plants, and that would be another type of exotic voluntourism, is to go and get into one of these projects with where was it, in Jordan. There's a sub-sea level community there that had been, again, depleted. The soil had been destroyed because they tried monoculture and things like that, and just to go and help the revitalization of the area. So anyway, I throw all that out there because just you've inspired me to think about new dynamics in what you all have done. And so you could have the plants, and of course you all have got the animals covered. But that would be neat if that was to ever emerge, however it does, that those things can be arranged.
I'm sure that there are programs that exist that are local community programs that through decolonization have said, we've lived here for thousands of years and it was fine until we were colonized and told to have a monoculture, and told in capitalism, you should grow these types of trees, you should grow these types of things, we'll buy things from you until you can't anymore and trading stops. And so yeah, I'm sure we have a few programs that we do, like seagrass recovery or mangrove restoration.
I saw that,
yeah. And it's amazing because, again, it's the local people that are saying, we know how this is supposed to look, and we have been living in reciprocity with the natural world until tourism and capitalism came in and screwed things up. And so it's getting back to, sort of pre-contact and decolonizing it. So tourism has like a lot to answer for, but it can have have like a really cool role to play in saying, we did screw this up, but wow, can we learn a whole lot about living in a wadi and agriculture in the desert and things like that. It can be, just so much learning that people living there already know, and it exists.
Right. And it can inform us of our future too, because North American monoculture agriculture has some reckoning to do, corn, rice, soybeans, things like that. We need to, and unfortunately, a lot of that, you mentioned veganism, a lot of that goes to animals, and there's a better way. There's the concept of antinatalism that is out there, and people talk about it with humans, but I'm like, I'm a agricultural animal antinatalist. I think we could get rid of all the pigs, all the cows, all the chickens, and we'll all be just fine. It's one of my little bizarre fantasies. It's like, and I do eat oysters and sardines occasionally. I mean, I mostly plant-based diet, but you think about the carbon cost of animal farming and what that means. And so I'm not a full-on vegan, but I totally embrace not only the ethics, but the economic impact that has, and that the sort of the vegetable, the plant-based diversity that can arise from when we don't have to grow a billion bushels of corn, soybeans, and whatever to sustain meat products, meat raising, industrial meat and things like that. And it's not that I suggest anybody give up meat. I always say to people, try 10%, try 20%. So if I have 21 meal periods in my week, 2 of them have sardines or oysters in them or whatever, but the other, say 17 to 19, sometimes it fluctuates, meals are all plant-based, and I'm fine. I'm okay. I used to eat a lot of meat, and I'm okay. So it's doable.
Yeah,
And again,
there's other ways.
right. And there's degrees. Just give up 10%. Don't, go one day a week with just a plant-based diet, and try it and see.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can do your, do the chicken and all that, sausage, whatever you want the rest of the week. And what I found is since I've cut away from most of that, I don't have any taste for it. I just can't. I could never eat a steak again. I could never eat red meat again. Once in a, like if somebody puts a plate down in front of me, I will be polite, and I'm in their home, and I will eat what they. So I guess I will eat a steak in that context. I don't think I'll enjoy it, but I'll do it because again, I don't want to be rude to my host. But given my druthers, I just have no taste for that at all anymore. So it's for anybody that's thinking about it and is concerned that they might be once again giving something up. You're gaining a lot. Because my wife and I have been able to experiment with food. And I used to be a chef, so I have no excuse. I did it for 20 years. And so I should know how to prepare food and make it taste good. So anyway, it would be neat to see what's out on the horizon. Maybe I should do some research on that and see what's going on with plant or horticulture-based voluntourism. That would be neat to discover, I guess, to pull forward. I'm trying to think if I had any other questions for you, and I'd like to, I guess one question is, do you have anything that you'd like to present to those who are watching that we didn't cover in this interview? So we could probably, I've had you for an hour and 20 minutes, and I don't want to take too much of your time, actually probably closer to an hour and a half. So before we do wrap things up, I'd like to see if there's anything else you want to talk about or present with regard to either AEI, yourself, or the B Corps.
It's hard to think I would have any more to say after talking so much.
Yeah. We covered a lot of terrain.
Yeah. I think that's the interesting thing when I tell people that I don't even work with animals, that I have an animal-based tourism company. That sort of like, people shut down that like, oh, I only like animals. And I think it's important that all of us live on many different intersections. And so all those intersections can be interests, and they can, you can go down lots of different ways, and you don't have to identify as tourism or animal or B Corp. Like you can do all the things and none of the things, and it always gets to change. I guess one small thing that I would like to talk about is just the idea of consent in tourism, because it is something in this past year that we've been really talking about. We sort of, I hate the term pivot. We transitioned from getting a lot of people volunteering to having no one volunteer, and so we transitioned to doing a lot of teaching in classrooms, in professional settings. And through it all, I talked a lot about how we do ethical volunteering, but like what are ethics and how can you define those? And so that got distilled down into what I started calling a consent-based model, which I've been told is not a model yet, but if I call it one, that it is.
Yeah, right. Henceforth.
Yeah.
You heard it here.
This is a thing.
Yes, exactly.
But a consent-based model for volunteering and in tourism in general, I think is a really accessible, straightforward way to just make tourism just nicer, ethical, etc. We're in a time now, hopefully, that we are talking about consent in many different avenues in our life, and we're understanding respectful conversations, interactions, and everything in between. And so I think it's a really good, we understand consent. Why wouldn't we bring the idea of consent into tourism?
Right.
When you go into a community, are you not just like accepted, but are you welcomed? Are you asked to be there? You wouldn't just walk into your neighbor's house without asking or knocking, unless you had a pre-existing relationship. They said just walk in, unless they already gave you consent.
Yes.
Why are we in tourism just assuming we have consent because we're showing up to whole countries and also communities? And the same with animals. It's a lot of people say, well, how do I know I'm, ethically interacting with animals? And if we just break it down to consent, it can be like a very easy, of course, not a binary, but a very easy yes or no for at that moment. Is an animal tethered? Do they have chains? Are they in a cage? If they are, then they can't leave the interaction and they're not actually consenting. They're being coerced into interacting with you, but it's not a yes. And then in tourism as well, I think coming back to you, do you actually want to be there? Are you actually on an experience you want to have? And it doesn't even have to be as like, are you doing it for the wrong reasons? But are you comfortable? If you listen to your gut, if you listen to yourself, like, and you do something that you feel good about, that is a full body yes, then you are much, if you're volunteering, you're much better in that volunteering role. You're learning a lot. You're being a much bigger and better service than if you're blocked off and saying, I'm comfortable, I don't really like this. And it goes with all volunteering. If you are somewhere that you're uncomfortable for whatever reason it is, you're not going to enjoy your experience. And it's not, you're not consenting to it. So why are you there? Is it not hurt someone's feelings? Is it to show off in some way? Is it, a whole mixture of other things? I think, like in consenting to ourselves and to animals and to people and to the environment, it's just an easy way to think about ethics without having to have an hour and a half conversation about ethics. You get to just go like, yes, no, ooh.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a philosophy geek, and so there is a huge discussion on ethics. So you have Kantian ethics and categorical imperatives or whatever. And there's a guy named Arthur Schopenhauer, and his was ethics of compassion. And he makes some very good points in that that should be one of the grounding features of ethics. Is so Kant rather was more of the oughts and the moral sort of aspect of it. That you ought to be doing this for moral reasons, but this guy Schopenhauer, who certainly had his faults in the world, if you look into his history, he's got some issues. But anyway, the compassion-based ethics, I think, is perfect for what you're describing. And so, and I love that it's the consent is multifaceted, so that the animals, the sponsors, and the person engaging in the experience have all agreed. And what a beautiful environment and space to do
and
the best.
Everyone has autonomy, I think, is also an important bit, because it's not just me saying this is for your betterment and I'm doing this, like the iRobot idea of like the robots are actually helping us in a very binary yes no kind of way. We're given no autonomy to what the interaction will be. It's again, it's not us being white saviors saying it's ethical for me to do this for you. It's an interaction that we all have autonomy. We are all saying yes. We're all collaborating and coming together. And I think it demystifies a lot of like what ethics could be, but also like where we can settle going, well, I'm not really sure. And like, and whose ethics and what lens and what isms are behind it. It gets to be an actual conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had talked about cultural relativism before, and that's a beautiful example where, clear your mind of that, of any sort of your biases, of your, it's like FOK with people who practice science. They have to they have to be agnostic to the science that they're going to do. And so culturally, you have to be agnostic to, or not, that's not a good word, FOK, which is to suspend judgment and to go in with a fresh, open perspective, which again is the in the cultural relativist perspective. I think that is the high end of it, the noble end or the egalitarian end of that, because again, people can spend hours talking about that, the shadow side of that relativism. But I think this is where it has its prominence as far as being for the good and for the better. So absolutely. And so lastly, I think if we could, you mentioned that the growth of AEI will be managed in the sense that it honors its its foundations and its adherence to, as we just were discussing, ethics and sustainability and just everything that it stands for will be maintained going into the growth. And so can you share a little bit of what you think growth looks like for AEI, maybe in the next decade, and you know, what does that look like? Because again, I totally agree. I think it needs to be done in a way that that makes sense in each step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, the very best case scenario is AEI eventually goes out of business because no animals are ever exploited again.
There you go.
So done. So that won't be 10 years, maybe 20.
Okay.
But so in the next 10 years, I think the evolution of how we interact with animals has changed since we started AEI and will continue to change.
Mm-hmm.
And so our elephant sanctuary in Thailand, the first time I went there before AEI was even a glimmer, was in 2008. And
Mm-hmm.
at that time, how we interacted with elephants has changed to how we interact with elephants in 2021. Mm. And that's because we've just learned more about them.
Right.
And we used to think that elephants, 30 years ago, we thought that elephants were just beasts of burden and they're huge and they can have tons of weight on their back. Mm. And through a greater understanding of biology, we understand that they actually have really long vertebrae, and their long vertebrae are not meant to have any downward pressure. Okay. They have huge shoulders and huge scapula, so they can pull a lot, but any downward pressure breaks their vertebrae quite easily, even one person on their back. Okay. And so when I was at the Elephant Center in 2008, there was no riding of the elephants, but there was still swimming and like washing the elephants. Okay. But we now have an understanding that elephants and humans share a lot of the same skin traits, and we can get dermatitis, just ectoparasites that make us itchy. We can pass it to elephants and get it from elephants. And so if we're truly helping these elephants, we shouldn't be making them itchy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that has changed. And then the interactions that we have with elephants change as well. We understand that they're huge creatures that have never been domesticated. They are wild animals that are around people because they were broken. And their behavior was constantly modified and is still modified through violence and through the perceived violence that can happen. So we used to think, oh, the elephants are tame, and if we walk around them, they'll be okay with it. We're understanding more in like elephant psychology that cortisol goes up when they see humans, when they see certain things, and do they need to be socialized around people? Probably not. Are they happier being wild animals? Probably. Yeah. And should it be consenting? If we have an elephant center and we have a barrier between humans and elephants, if an elephant is curious and wants to come up to a human, yes, of course, that would be amazing. It would be so magical. Right. But who are we to say an elephant should be around me? And who am I to coerce an elephant into having a cortisol level stress in their brain, having that spike because I want to have a picture around them. Yeah. So this is something that has continually changed in the 10 years of AEI. We've had less and less and less interaction with elephants. And I think through the rest of the programs that we have, it will look the same way. We will understand better how to interact with animals, better how to engage them, better how to engage communities in humane welfare of street dogs and things like that. And through like mass vaccination programs for rabies and other things that animals can carry. I think that AEI will grow because we will have more volunteers, and every volunteer will be the most up to date about animal ethics at that time. And then the next volunteer will be the next up to date with animal ethics. So hopefully all kind of like boats rise that like when they go away, they have this idea that some of it is translated and explained to other people, but all certainly not all animal exploitation is over and finished, but we just have a greater understanding that animal exploitation exists, but the counter also exists, and we can be better for animals, and we can be better not just for animals, but also in tourism for the people that we're interacting with.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of a long-winded answer. That short answer, we'll have more volunteers. Won't that be good? But I think the global consciousness in tourism will just be a better understanding of what our beneficial footprint can look like and how we all have one. So it doesn't have to be, I either take a vacation that I sit on a beach, or I have a vacation that I volunteer with sea turtles. I do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Work with sea turtles in the morning, sit on the beach in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Amazing. And we're happy in all ways.
Yeah.
But the way that I see sea turtles isn't in the way that perhaps my grandparents or my parents would have saw them in a tank.
Yeah.
It is not exploited. It's in the natural world. The price I pay to see sea turtles is to volunteer with them,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have an afternoon off. And I think that would be such a beautiful way to change tourism. That it's not about it's not entitlement. It is about service.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Beautiful. So that is growth, and that is expansion. And it's, as you said, all the boats will rise together. So it's a dynamic emergence, learning and reacting to, or not reacting, but sort of proactively engaging that new information and converting it into, like you said, a more ethical experience and a more useful from the benefit of the animal's perspective. So what a wonderful way to grow. Beautiful answer. That works. That works. Yeah, right. We've covered a lot in this conversation, and I'm grateful for that. You've informed me and enlightened me, and I'm just looking. I'm going to keep following AEI and look forward to the growth. I might even ask you to come back in a year or so, or maybe a year and a half, because again, when things open up and things are moving again, and again, what we were just talking about with the boats rising, I like that. It'd be fun to check in with you at some point. Maybe we can carry the conversation forward, because you and I both like to talk, and I think that's cool. Because it's good talk, It's meaningful talk, I think. Well, we'll say it's meaningful, and we'll let the world decide. But no, we really covered a lot of terrain here, and I'm glad we did. And I know hopefully when we turn this video out, this little product that we created, and turn it out into the world, that it'll be AEI, it'll be B Corps, it'll be justice for all of us humans, and we'll see what happens to it. It's a little creation that will go out and do its thing.
Well, I'm happy to be part of it. I think, I co-sign everything that we've talked about. I think
beautiful.
It's all been important, and it's all, just part of the journey to, all of us just trying to be a little bit better every day.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's the foundation of what I do here with the IdeaCast interview series is, above all, is human flourishing. And that includes everything around us. So it includes the plants and the animals that we share this planet with. Also meaning making and sense making, and your story, who you are and what you've done, along with Dr. Reed, is meaning making, in my opinion. And it is also sense making, because you are taking sort of an empathic position to have an effect on what goes on, both in business as well as just generating experience for people. And so, for so many reasons, that's a good narrative and a good story. And that's what I seek out in these interviews, is to find people like yourself and engage with them and inspire others. I really hope that, again, when this little video crawls out and does things, that it meets people, and it has that conversation with them, or they can come away from that conversation and be inspired. Because your work that the two of you do was, again, reading up doing my research, and it changes lives on the ground and in the experience, and they come back changed and affected, and that's what we need. I think we need that kind of exposure. You were talking about resilience building in children, and building empathy and compassion. I was watching a video on the street dogs of Mexico, and when they were doing spaying and neutering, and just, you know, it really touches you, and it brings you in contact with your humanity.
Absolutely.
You know, and a lot of us need that, including myself. I like to check in with my humanity from time to time.
Yeah.
And stay away from the news. You know?
Yeah.
Less news, more of this. You know, and it's not escapism. It's very real. It's very tangible. And so anyway, Nora, thank you so very much for this conversation. Again, I think it was brilliant and insightful. And you're doing an amazing job. You're an empowered woman, and I celebrate that. And again, one of the things that this creation can do is inspire other women to take charge and do powerful and amazing things. So thank you for that. Thank you for being that representative and demonstrating what's possible. So appreciate it.
Oh,
and
thank
again,
you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
For having me here.
Oh, of course. Like I said, it totally fits within what I'm trying to do. And so I'm soup to nuts. I want to talk to musicians, media artists, activists, and sometimes even just ordinary people that have had an extraordinary experience in their life, and they can share that. And so, you know, it's open-ended, whatever it is. But again, it circles back to flourishing and meaning making and sense making, and how do we thrive in an ethical way and in a grounded way. So yeah, you're part of that, and your company is part of it. I don't know why I'm hung up on organization, but your organized company.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
We are very organized.
You're very well organized company, thanks to you. Is just it's a testament to the best that humans can be and do. So thank you. I honor that and recognize that, and I appreciate that. And again, I'll check in with you, and I'll go ahead and stop recording. We'll say goodbye off the whatever it is, the record. We can say goodbye that way. But again, thank you so very much. And here is to unfathomable success and unlimited success for whatever it is that you see and however you measure success. I want to see that for you. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Justin.
Any parting words before we sign off?
Oh my goodness, just yeah, just thank you for having me and having these discussions, and yeah, just bringing everyone into the discussion. I think everything that we talked about was accessible because everything is out there, and it's not because we are higher educated or have money or have different experiences. It's because we were naturally curious and wanted to learn more. And so I think the people that come into this discussion also feel the same way. So I'm super happy to have that discussion so all of us can be more curious and all of us can discuss this more.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I think that's the perfect way to end this part one of this interview. And well, like I said, I want to give it some time and get you all back to where everything's flowing, and maybe we can check in down the road and see how you all are doing.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk about that for sure. All right. Well, everybody watching this video, those who are changed or curious by this discussion, I will have information for AEI, and I will have the YouTube channel for AEI in the description field. And so please take it from here and learn more and exercise that curiosity, and you'll be impressed. So, and consider being a volunteerist with them. That goes without saying. I think, you know, if you're planning, if you're open to new experience, as the psychologist would say, this is a great place, I think, a great environment and a great company to do that with. So check it out. And all right, Nora, I'll say goodbye to you after I hit stop, and goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for your time.